Why did the laughter sting more when it came from soldiers than from children at school? Emma tightened her grip on her father's hand as they crossed the courtyard of Fort. Her tiny boots struck the pavement with deliberate rhythm, each step mimicking the cadence she had watched older soldiers perfect for years. The sun was still rising, painting long shadows across the concrete, and her miniature camouflage uniform seemed to blend into the morning light. She wore it proudly because it wasn't just clothing to her. It was her brother's gift. Had mailed it home before his deployment, telling her that if she ever wore it, she had to wear it with the heart of a soldier, with discipline, respect, and pride. That uniform wasn't a toy. It was a promise. But promises felt fragile when people laughed. Ahead, a group of young sergeants leaned against the wall, their rifles slung casually, their chatter carrying across the open space. One of them, tall, with a grin that looked more like a smirk than a smile, noticed her. He elbowed his buddy. "Look at this little soldier," he said, voice sharp enough for her to hear. "Playing dress-up in Daddy's workplace." The others chuckled, a quick chorus of mocking laughter. Words that weren't meant to cut so deep, yet landed with precision sharper than any bullet. Emma's head lifted instinctively, her small chin pointed forward. She didn't stop walking. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Still, she felt her father's hand tighten around hers, and she knew he'd heard it too. Another voice followed. "Maybe we should get her a toy rifle," the second sergeant added, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Let her pretend she's shooting at arcade targets." The laughter grew, echoing, bouncing against walls that had witnessed decades of discipline and sacrifice. Soldiers training nearby glanced over, some shaking their heads, others ignoring it altogether. The base was full of noise, but this was the kind that stuck. Emma swallowed. She wanted to ask why men who wore the same uniform as would treat her like this. Why men who swore to values of honor and respect could turn those values into jokes when faced with someone smaller, someone younger, someone easier to dismiss. She whispered almost too softly for her father to hear. "Daddy, why are they laughing at me?" Her father, staff sergeant, didn't look back at the mocking soldiers. His jaw was locked, his step steady. "Because," he said gently, "some people don't understand passion when they see it, but that doesn't make your passion any less real." His words were meant to comfort, but Emma felt the ache in her chest anyway. It wasn't the first time she had been mocked. Kids at school thought it was strange for a girl to care about rifles or tactics or camouflage. She learned to ignore them. But here, in the heart of the military, in the place where spirit felt closest, the laughter weighed heavier. And yet she didn't let the tears fall. Soldiers didn't cry in front of doubters, had told her that. The shooting range came into view. She loved this place, though she had never once touched a rifle herself. She had watched from benches, memorizing the crack of different calibers, studying how soldiers controlled their breathing, how instructors adjusted a stance with a single touch to the shoulder. Had explained diagrams to her in his manuals, tracing his finger over sketches of sight alignment, explaining how patience mattered more than strength. Her brother's voice echoed inside her now. Real soldiers don't prove themselves with laughter. They prove themselves with calm hands and steady hearts. But those voices behind her didn't stop. The sergeants walked toward the range as well, still chuckling, still tossing words like stones. "Look at her little salute," one whispered. "She thinks she's actually enlisted." Their laughter carried, and though some soldiers shot them disapproving looks, no one stepped in. Emma straightened her shoulders, every muscle tight. She thought of how he would want her to stand, how he had once told her that dignity wasn't loud, it was quiet, steady, unshakable. She climbed onto the bench at the range, her small boots dangling above the ground, and sat still while her father handled paperwork with the range officer. The sounds of gunfire filled the air, sharp cracks rolling over the field. To anyone else it might sound chaotic, but to Emma it was music she could identify by ear. The low boom of a heavier caliber, the sharp snap of a smaller rifle. She closed her eyes and tested herself, whispering the answers silently. And then more laughter. The same soldiers had taken their firing positions. Their shots rang out, messy and scattered. One of them, the loudest of the group, cursed under his breath as he missed target after target at 300 meters. His frustration built with every wasted bullet, every missed mark. But Emma didn't just hear the shots, she saw the mistakes. He held his breath too long, making his arms shake. His elbow wasn't resting on anything solid, leaving his rifle to wobble. His trigger finger jerked instead of squeezing smooth. Each mistake was clear as sunlight. Mistakes had taught her to spot years earlier. The sergeants laughed at her, but their own shots were the joke. She watched quietly, her eyes narrowing. Then one of them said it, loud enough for everyone nearby. "Hey, maybe the little soldier should give it a try. Bet she thinks she's better than us." It wasn't just a joke, it was a dare, a challenge. Emma's father glanced over, saw the flicker in his daughter's eyes. He knelt down beside her. "What are you thinking about?" Her voice was steady, almost too calm for her age. Said it's not about being strong or big. It's about being calm, about listening to your heartbeat. That sergeant, he's doing it wrong. Her father blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" She pointed with her eyes, not her finger. "He's holding his breath too long. His elbow isn't supported, and he pulls too hard on the trigger." Her father was silent for a moment, staring at her. He knew had taught her things, but he hadn't realized just how deeply she had absorbed them. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. Emma nodded. "Showed me in his manuals. He told me muscles get tired, bones don't." Behind them, someone else had been listening. A voice cut in, calm, deep, authoritative. "Master Sergeant Williams, the range supervisor. Did I just hear you diagnose a shooting problem, young lady?" Emma's eyes went wide for the first time. She hadn't meant to speak so loud, but her father gave her a nod of encouragement. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice small but clear. The master sergeant studied her, then the struggling, his brows furrowed. "Tell me what you saw." Emma stood, swallowing her nerves. "He holds his breath too long. His arm isn't supported, so the rifle shakes, and he pulls the trigger too fast. You're supposed to press it slow, just the fingertip, straight back." The range quieted. A few soldiers nearby paused their shooting to listen. Turned his head, his face twisting into disbelief. "You're telling me," he barked, "that an 8-year-old thinks she knows more about rifles than me?" His friends chuckled nervously, but their laughter wasn't as loud this time. Emma's cheeks burned. For a moment she thought of shrinking back. She could already hear his mocking voice if she got it wrong, but then she thought of again. Courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about standing steady anyway. So she lifted her chin and repeated herself. Clear, steady. "You're holding your breath too long, you're pulling too hard, you're not steady." The words dropped heavy into the silence. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, proud but silent. Master Sergeant Williams gave the faintest nod. "She's right." The range shifted. Soldiers turned, murmurs spreading. Froze, his face red, his pride hit harder than any bullet. Emma sat back down, her heart racing in her chest, but she didn't look away. She held his stare, her small frame steady against the weight of his disbelief. And in that moment, something shifted at Fort. A little girl's voice, quiet, precise, unshaken, had pierced the walls of arrogance. The mockery wasn't over, not yet, but this was the first crack. And Emma, without knowing it, had just stepped into a test that would define her far beyond camouflage and toy jokes. How do you tell the difference between silence that protects you and silence that traps you? Emma sat frozen on the bench, her boots barely brushing the air. Around her, the range had gone unnaturally still. Soldiers who had been firing a moment ago now stood watching, rifles slack at their sides. His flushed face turned toward her, disbelief written into every line of his expression. "You've got to be kidding me," he snapped. "She's 8 years old. 8. You want me to take advice from someone who still plays with dolls?" A low murmur spread through the crowd. Some soldiers shifted uncomfortably, others crossed their arms, waiting. Emma's chest tightened. He wasn't mocking her uniform anymore. He was mocking her mind, her worth. But before she could answer, Master Sergeant Williams spoke with a calm, deliberate tone. "Sergeant, I've been training marksmen for 15 years. What she said was accurate." That word, accurate, hung heavier than any bullet. Blinked, his jaw worked but no sound came. He glanced at his friends, searching for backup. They shifted uneasily, their laughter now brittle. Emma could feel the shift. The laughter had lost its power. But power is never surrendered easily. "Sir, with all due respect," forced out, his voice loud to cover the crack in it, "this is ridiculous. We're wasting time letting a child pretend she knows how to shoot." A hush fell again. Then another voice cut through, sharper, carrying authority no one could dismiss. "Then prove her wrong." Every soldier at the range snapped to attention before the words even settled. Colonel Hayes stood at the edge of the firing line, her presence commanding silence like a switch had been flipped. She hadn't announced herself. She hadn't needed to. Everyone knew who she was, the commander of Fort, a woman with 25 years of service and a reputation for expecting excellence without compromise. Emma's heart lurched. She hadn't seen the colonel arrive. How long had she been watching? Colonel Hayes stepped forward, her eyes steady on. "You're confident that this young lady's advice is worthless. Fine, here's the test. Take 5 shots using her recommendations, then 5 more the way you've been shooting. Let the target speak." His throat bobbed. His pride trapped him. To refuse would be insubordination. To accept meant risking humiliation. "Yes, ma'am," he said stiffly. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. This was it. The moment her words would either collapse into laughter or hold steady like the bullseye on the target. Her father crouched beside her again, his hand warm against her small shoulder. "Steady. You've already done more than most adults would." But Emma's mind was racing. What if she was wrong? What if lessons, the diagrams, the whispered explanations, didn't work in real life? She felt the burn of doubt press against her ribs. Then she remembered his voice. "Trust what you know. Don't rush. Don't doubt." She drew in a slow breath. Adjusted his position on the firing line. For the first time, he followed someone else's instructions instead of his own ego. He let out half a breath, settled his elbow on the rest, placed only the tip of his finger on the trigger. The crack of the rifle echoed across the range. Soldiers craned their necks to see. The bullet struck close to the center, closer than anything had hit all morning. A ripple of murmurs spread. His lips pressed into a line. He fired again, slower this time, closer still. By his third shot, his grouping was than Emma had ever seen from him. The silence wasn't mocking anymore. It was awe. Emma's small hands clenched in her lap. She couldn't look away. Each shot was proof that teachings weren't just words in a manual. They were real, true, stronger than laughter. After the 5th shot, his target showed a cluster near the bullseye. It wasn't perfect, but it was undeniable improvement. Then, as ordered, he returned to his old technique. The results were immediate. His grouping scattered wide, messy, uncontrolled. By the time he finished, the difference between the 2 sets of targets was painful to look at. Colonel Hayes walked forward, examining both sheets. She turned, her eyes sweeping over every soldier watching. "The results are clear. This young lady's observations were correct. Accuracy improved significantly when her advice was applied." Emma's breath caught. The colonel's words felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. But the colonel wasn't finished. Her gaze returned to Emma. "Tell me something, young lady. Have you ever fired a rifle yourself?" The question landed like a weight. Every head turned toward Emma. She swallowed, straightening her back. "No, ma'am. My brother, he's deployed. He taught me theory. He promised to teach me in person when he came home." The colonel tilted her head, studying her. "And yet, without firing a single shot, You just diagnosed problems trained instructors have struggled to fix for months. Remarkable. Master Sergeant Williams stepped in. Ma'am, with your permission, I'd like to see if her knowledge holds under practical application. A murmur spread. Soldiers whispered, eyes flicking toward whose face had drained pale. The idea of being outshot by a child, the same child he mocked, was unbearable. You can't be serious, he muttered. But Colonel Hayes was serious. Her voice carried no hesitation. Staff Sergeant, would your daughter be willing to demonstrate under supervision? Emma's father looked down at her, eyes full of pride but also concern. He searched her face. She didn't hesitate. Yes, ma'am, Emma said, her voice steady. If it's safe, I'd like to try. The colonel nodded once. Good, Master Sergeant set her up. A flurry of motion followed. Williams retrieved a .22 caliber rifle, lighter, designed for training but demanding precision nonetheless. He adjusted the bench, placed rests to accommodate her size, explained safety protocols. Emma listened intently, though most of it she already knew from lessons. As she approached the firing line, the crowd swelled. Word had spread across the base. Soldiers filtered in, curious to witness the impossible, a child stepping into the shoes of marksmen twice her age. Shifted uncomfortably, his earlier mockery now a spotlight exposing him. His friends had gone quiet. The laughter that once seemed so harmless now looked cruel in hindsight. Emma settled into position, her heart racing. Her father's voice echoed softly from behind. Remember, breathe, focus, trust yourself. The rifle felt strange in her small hands, heavier than she imagined, colder. But she remembered tracing diagrams in his manuals, explaining where her cheek should rest, how her elbow should brace. She remembered the way he told her to breathe until her heartbeat slowed. She exhaled, half a breath held. The world narrowed to the sight picture before her. The black circle of the target, the trigger beneath her fingertip. She squeezed, slow, steady. The rifle cracked. Silence followed. Every head turned toward the target downrange. The bullet struck the outer edge of the bull's. A murmur of disbelief rippled. A few claps broke out, scattered but genuine. Emma blinked, her chest tight. She had done it, not perfectly, but enough. Beginner's luck, muttered under his breath, but even he didn't sound convinced. Emma steadied herself. She remembered telling her once, one good shot proves nothing. Consistency proves everything. She lined up again, breath pressed. The second shot landed closer. The third closer still. By the fourth and fifth, her grouping showed a consistency that silenced every whisper of doubt. Colonel Hayes approached the target herself, staring for a long moment before turning back. In 25 years of service, I have never seen anything quite like this. Emma lowered the rifle, her small chest rising and falling, her heart hammering inside her. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She only stood straight-backed the way had taught her. The soldiers who had laughed earlier now avoided her gaze. Their silence wasn't protective. It was the silence of respect, reluctantly born. And for the first time, Emma realized silence could be a weapon, not of shame, but of dignity. What happens when the smallest voice in the room becomes the one no one can ignore? The range was still echoing with Emma's last shot. Soldiers stood in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the target that bore the proof of her precision. The grouping was tight, controlled, better than most of the men who had mocked her could manage on their best days. Colonel Hayes walked closer, her boots striking the ground in sharp, measured steps. She studied the target, then turned to face the assembled soldiers. Her gaze swept over them, Blake, Torres, the gathered recruits, and the veterans who had trickled in once whispers of the scene spread. In all my years, she said, her voice carrying the weight of command, I have rarely witnessed such composure. This young lady, without formal training, has just demonstrated accuracy many of you struggle to achieve after months of practice. Her words carried no exaggeration. The truth was visible on the target, undeniable. Emma stood frozen, the rifle resting on the bench, her heart thundering in her small chest. She didn't know whether to bow her head or stand taller. She only remembered Sid's advice: never shrink when you've done your best. Stand steady, even if your knees shake. So she did. But the colonel wasn't finished. She turned sharply to, "Sergeant, you began this morning mocking someone based on appearance and age, without knowing her, without respect. Do you see your mistake now?" His face burned red, his jaw clenched so tight it trembled. For a moment it looked like he might argue, then the weight of the colonel's eyes crushed the last of his pride. He looked at the ground. "Yes, ma'am." Blake and Torres shifted beside him, shame written across their posture. Their earlier laughter seemed like a stain they couldn't scrub away. The colonel's voice hardened. "Mockery has no place in this uniform. Assumptions have no place in this profession. In combat, underestimating someone can get you killed, or worse, it can get your brothers killed. Do not forget this." Her words cut deeper than Emma's corrections ever could. Swallowed hard, the sting of humiliation had shifted into something else: realization. Emma's father stood tall behind her, his hand lightly resting on her shoulder, not guiding but steadying. She felt his pride radiating without a word. Then unexpectedly, soldiers began to clap. It started with one hesitant, then another. Soon the range filled with the sound of palms striking together, not as a roar but as a steady, deliberate rhythm. A recognition. Respect. Emma's cheeks flushed, but she kept her chin high. Colonel Hayes lifted a hand, quieting the applause. "This is more than a performance to be admired. It is a lesson. I want every available soldier on this base to assemble here by 1700 hours. What happened today will not be hidden. It will be remembered." The announcement rippled through the crowd. A base-wide assembly for this. For a child, it was unprecedented. Emma sat back down, suddenly overwhelmed. Her small hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. The rifle was taken away, but the weight in her chest lingered. Her father crouched beside her again, lowering his voice. "How do you feel?" She hesitated. Pride swelled in her, yes, but so did something else. Fear. The eyes of grown men, trained soldiers, were on her, waiting for her words, her presence. She had wanted to prove herself, but not like this. Not in front of everyone. I just wanted them to stop laughing," she whispered. Her father gave a small smile. "And you did, not with anger, with truth." She nodded, biting her lip. But inside, the conflict grew. She wasn't supposed to be here, not like this. She was just Emma, a little girl who wore her brother's uniform to feel close to him. She wasn't supposed to be the one teaching soldiers how to hold a rifle. And yet here she was. By late afternoon, the sun dipped lower, casting amber light across the base. Soldiers filed into formation near the range, hundreds of them, their boots beating in unison. The courtyard buzzed with whispers. The story had spread like wildfire. An 8-year-old had outshot trained sergeants. Emma stood near her father, her small frame dwarfed by the mass of uniforms around her. She clutched his hand tightly, her other hand fidgeting at her side. Colonel Hayes stepped onto a raised platform. Her presence silenced the crowd instantly. "Today," she began, "something extraordinary happened on this range. Many of you have already heard the whispers. I want you to hear the truth." She gestured, and Emma felt every eye turn toward her. Her breath caught. "This young lady, Emma, daughter of Staff Sergeant, has demonstrated knowledge and composure far beyond her years. Without firing a rifle before today, she identified and corrected flaws that our instructors have been addressing for months. And when given the chance, she proved her knowledge with action." The murmurs rose again, soldiers craning to get a better look at her. Emma wanted to shrink into her father's side, but she forced herself to stand. "This is not about a child firing a rifle," the colonel continued. "This is about respect, about humility, about recognizing that knowledge can come from unexpected places, and about remembering that arrogance blinds us but respect sharpens us. She paused, letting the words sink in. Blake Torres stepped forward. The three young sergeants obeyed, stiff, their shame visible to all. You mocked without understanding, Hayes said, her tone sharp as steel. And today you learned a lesson. You will spend the next week under Master Sergeant Williams' instruction, relearning what you thought you already knew, and you will do so with humility. Yes, ma'am, they said in unison, their voices tight. Emma's chest tightened as she watched them. Part of her felt vindicated, but another part felt pity. They were soldiers, grown men, and they had been undone by a little girl's steady words and steady aim. Was it fair? Was it too much? But then she remembered their laughter, the sting of it, the way it tried to strip her dignity away. Respect wasn't taken from them. It was something they had failed to give. The colonel's voice softened now. Let this day be a reminder. We are not soldiers because of the patches on our sleeves or the rifles in our hands. We are soldiers because we respect, because we learn, because we grow. And sometimes, the greatest teachers come in the smallest packages. The assembly broke into applause again, louder this time. Not mocking, not hesitant, genuine. Emma's heart swelled, but she also felt a strange weight settle on her shoulders. A weight she didn't understand fully yet. That night back at home, Emma sat at her desk, staring at her brother's old training manual. She traced the diagrams with her finger, the same way he had once guided her hand. She thought about the soldier's eyes on her, the way Colonel Hayes had spoken, the shame on his face. Her father entered quietly, leaning against the doorway. Couldn't sleep. Emma shook her head. Daddy, I didn't mean for it to go that far. Her father stepped closer, kneeling beside her chair. You didn't choose this. You simply spoke the truth. The rest, that was their choice, their reaction. And sometimes truth makes people uncomfortable before it sets them free. Emma frowned. What if they still hate me? Her father's eyes softened. Then let them. Respect isn't something you beg for, it's something you live, and you lived it today. She nodded slowly, her small fingers brushing over the sketches of rifles, her brother's handwriting in the margins. A thought stirred in her chest, a quiet fear, but also a quiet hope. Maybe would be proud. Maybe she hadn't just worn his uniform. Maybe, in some way, she had lived it. Outside, the base was still buzzing with the story. By morning, the tale of the little girl who had silenced Mockery with precision would spread even further. And Emma would have to decide what it meant to carry a legend she had never asked for. What happens when respect once is suddenly demanded by truth itself? The morning after the assembly, Fort buzzed like a hive. Soldiers whispered in the mess hall in barracks along the training fields. Stories traveled faster than orders. A little girl, no taller than a rifle, had outshot trained men. Some called it unbelievable. Others swore they had seen it with their own eyes. By midday, no one on the base doubted the truth. Emma didn't know what to make of it. She sat in the cafeteria beside her father, her tray untouched, her fork pushing scrambled eggs into little piles. Soldiers kept stealing glances at her, some nodding respectfully, others offering smiles. It felt strange to be seen, not as a visitor tagging along with her dad, but as someone who had done something that mattered. Her father watched her quietly, finally speaking in a low voice. I know this attention feels heavy, but you handled yourself yesterday with more dignity than many adults would. Don't let their eyes weigh you down. Let them remind you of what you carry. She looked up at him, frowning. What do I carry? He smiled softly. Respect and responsibility. The words lingered, heavier than the stares. Later at the range, Emma noticed something unexpected. A line of soldiers, rifles in hand, waited for their turn. But instead of ignoring her presence like before, some of them approached her directly. Excuse me, one private said nervously, scratching his neck. That thing you said yesterday about breathing, could you show me again? I think I've been holding too long too." Emma blinked. She wasn't sure if she was supposed to answer. She looked at her father, who gave a slight nod, so she stood, small and serious, and demonstrated with her own breathing. "In, half out, hold, then shoot. If you hold at all, you shake. Said you can't fight your heartbeat, you have to work with it." The private nodded, eyes wide, as if he had just received a secret passed down through generations. He went back to the line, tried again, and when his shot landed cleaner than before, he looked back at her with genuine gratitude. Emma felt warmth bloom in her chest, not pride, something softer, connection. More soldiers came, curious. Some asked about trigger control, others about stance. She explained as best she could, repeating lessons word for word, her voice steady, her explanations clear. Slowly, a small circle formed around her, listening as though she were an instructor rather than an 8-year-old girl. And then Sergeant First Class Maria Santos stepped forward, a veteran respected, known for her no-nonsense style. She crouched to Emma's level, her eyes sharp but kind. "Young lady," she said, "I've been teaching marksmanship for 10 years, and I'll admit the way you broke down breathing yesterday, I've never explained it that clearly. Would you be willing to share more of what your brother taught you?" Emma's heart leapt. This wasn't mockery, this wasn't pity, this was respect. She nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." And just like that, Emma found herself teaching soldiers twice, 3 times, even 4 times her age. Not as an expert, but as a vessel of knowledge passed from her brother. She wasn't showing off. She was sharing. But not everyone adjusted so quickly. From a distance watched. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrowed. Blake and Tors lingered near him, quiet now, the laughter long gone. "She's making us look like fools," muttered under his breath. Blake shifted uncomfortably. "She's not trying to, she just knows things, and she's right. You saw my shots yesterday. They got better when I followed her tips." Glared at him, but inside, his frustration warred with something unfamiliar, shame. For days, he'd brushed off his poor shooting as bad luck, bad weather, bad equipment. But one girl had stripped away every excuse in a matter of minutes. Master Sergeant Williams approached them, his expression unreadable. "Range, now." The 3 obeyed, their steps slow, their pride dragging behind them. Williams lined them up, his voice firm. "For the next week, you'll relearn everything you thought you knew. Stance, breathing, trigger, focus. You'll drill until you understand discipline, not just technique." They nodded, those jaws still clenched in resistance. "And you'll remember why," Williams continued. "Because you mocked what you didn't understand, and you were corrected not by someone older but by someone wiser. If that doesn't humble you, nothing will." The weight of his words sank into them. Blake lowered his head. Tors exhaled slowly, stayed stiff, but even he couldn't deny the truth. Meanwhile, Emma continued to draw quiet crowds at the range. She explained diagrams had shown her, the way wind could bend a bullet's path, how to adjust breathing for different distances. Soldiers scribbled notes, some even asking her to repeat phrases so they could capture them word for word. Each time, Emma's father watched from a distance, pride swelling in his chest. But he also saw something else, the beginnings of a transformation, not just in Emma but in the soldiers. They were learning humility in the most unexpected way. That evening, Colonel Hayes called Emma and her father to her office. The room was orderly, maps pinned on walls, commendations lined neatly. The colonel gestured for them to sit. "Emma," she began, her voice softer now than on the range, "what you've done here is remarkable. You've reminded us of something we too often forget, that respect is not earned by age or rank, but by knowledge and character." Emma shifted in her seat, unsure how to respond. "Thank you, ma'am." The colonel studied her. "But I want you to understand something. Yesterday wasn't just about hitting a target. It was about showing soldiers what it means to listen, to learn. You may not realize it, but you've started something here. A change." Emma's brow furrowed. "A change?" The colonel nodded. You've made grown men rethink how they see others. You've reminded them that humility is strength, that laughter at someone else's expense can blind us. That's not a small thing, Emma. That's leadership. The word landed heavily. Leadership. Emma was only 8. She didn't feel like a leader. She felt like a girl who missed her brother and wore his uniform to feel closer to him. Her father spoke up gently. "Ma'am, Emma never asked for this. She just wanted to honor her brother." The colonel nodded. "I understand, but sometimes leadership finds us whether we ask for it or not." Emma sat quietly, her small hands folded in her lap. The colonel's words rang in her ears long after they left the office. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The word leadership replayed over and over. She didn't feel like a leader. She felt like a little girl with shaky hands and a racing heart. But she remembered the way the soldiers had listened, the way their eyes had changed from doubt to respect. Maybe leadership wasn't about being the strongest or the loudest. Maybe it was about being steady, even when you wanted to run. And maybe, just maybe, had known this all along. The days that followed cemented what began on the range. Soldiers sought Emma's advice openly, and his friends, under William's stern guidance, drilled harder than ever. Slowly, their arrogance gave way to determination, their mockery replaced with grudging respect. Emma's presence on the base shifted from oddity to symbol, not because she was perfect, not because she was extraordinary, but because she had reminded them all of something simple, that respect isn't measured in age, size, or rank. It's measured in how you carry yourself when the world laughs. And as the sun set one evening, painting the sky in amber and crimson, Emma walked with her father past the range where it all began. Soldiers saluted her now, not mockingly, but sincerely. She saluted back, small hand raised, steady, proud. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was wearing uniform. She felt like she was carrying it. What does it mean to be seen by the one person whose opinion matters most? Emma's story traveled faster than she could have imagined. Soldiers wrote home about it. Officers retold the moment at briefings as if it were already legend. Within a week, Fort's tale of the little girl sniper had spread far beyond the base. But Emma didn't feel like a legend. She was still the girl who clutched her brother's training manuals at night, who wore his oversized cap to bed, who counted the days until his return. To her, wasn't just her brother, he was her anchor. The reason she walked with her head high even when laughter tried to pull it down. So when her father came home one afternoon carrying a package stamped with foreign dust and her brother's handwriting, Emma froze. Her hands trembled as she took it, the edges of the cardboard rough beneath her fingers. "From," her father said softly, his eyes glistening. Emma carried the package to her room, shut the door, and sat cross-legged on the floor. She traced her brother's handwriting one more time before tearing the tape. Inside, she found two things: a folded piece of official military paper, stiff, embossed, stamped, and a letter written in familiar hand. She opened the letter first. "Dear Emma, Dad told me everything. About Fort, about the range, about how you stood steady when grown men tried to shake you. I wish I could have been there, but maybe it's better I was. Because now the whole base knows what I've known for years. You have the heart, the mind, and the spirit of a soldier." Emma's breath caught. She kept reading, her eyes wide. "You didn't just shoot a rifle, Emma. You carried yourself with courage. You showed them respect when they gave you none. That is harder than hitting any bulls. That is leadership." Tears blurred her vision. Her brother's words matched Colonel Hayes's. Leadership. A word she still struggled to hold, but one that kept returning to her like an echo. She reached for the stiff paper next. When she unfolded it, her breath left her completely. It was a certificate, signed by his commanding officer overseas. Her name written clearly. "Emma is hereby recognized as an honorary junior instructor in military science, in recognition of outstanding dedication to military principles and exemplary composure under pressure. Her small hands shook as she held it. She wasn't imagining it. It wasn't just soldiers on the base humoring her. Even across the ocean, her brother's unit had honored her. At the bottom, had added a final paragraph in his messy, familiar scrawl. Emma, remember this. Being a soldier isn't about size or age or gender. It's about courage, knowledge, and respect. You proved all three. I can't wait to come home and learn from you. The last line undid her completely. She pressed the paper to her chest, tears falling freely now. He wanted to learn from her, not just teach, not just protect, learn. That night she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the stars, holding her brother's letter like a lifeline. She whispered the words to herself again and again. Courage, knowledge, respect. But as the days passed, something inside her shifted. Soldiers no longer just saluted her out of respect. They sought her out, asked her questions, shared their struggles. Emma, I can't keep my shots consistent past 200 meters. What am I missing? Emma, when the wind shifts, how do you adjust? They spoke her name with seriousness, not novelty. She was no longer just the girl in camouflage. She was the girl who had turned mockery into mastery. At first, Emma answered nervously, repeating lessons word for word. But gradually, she added her own thoughts. Observations she had made, connections she had pieced together while studying his manuals late at night. Her voice grew steadier, her explanations clearer. And as she spoke, she felt something unfamiliar but powerful, confidence not borrowed from but born from herself. Meanwhile, and his friends worked under Master Sergeant Williams. Day after day they drilled. Their laughter was gone, replaced by determination. Slowly their groups tightened. Their breathing steadied. Their respect grew, not just for the rifle, but for the lesson Emma had forced upon them. One afternoon approached Emma at the range. She stiffened, expecting mockery, but his face was different now, softer. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Look, I owe you an apology, he said. I shouldn't have laughed, I shouldn't have dismissed you. You were right, and you made me better, so thank you. Emma blinked, unsure what to say. For a long moment she only stared at him, the memory of his laughter burning at the edges of her mind. But then she remembered her father's words, respect isn't begged for, it's lived. She nodded once, you're welcome. Hesitated, then gave a small, almost shy smile before walking away. Emma turned back to the range, her heart pounding. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but maybe it wasn't supposed to be. Maybe it was supposed to be steady, like breathing through a shot, slow, deliberate, unshaken. Weeks passed, and Emma continued to visit the base with her father. Each time, she was greeted with genuine respect. Soldiers asked her for input. Officers nodded to her in hallways. Master Sergeant Williams even asked her to observe training sessions and share her perspective. The shooting range was renamed. A plaque installed at its entrance, the family range, in honor of service overseas and Emma's demonstration of courage, knowledge, and respect. When Emma saw it for the first time, she froze. Her name, etched in metal, alongside her brother's. She pressed her fingers against the cool surface, her chest swelling with pride and disbelief. Her father's voice broke the silence. This isn't just about shooting, it's about who you are, about who you're becoming. Emma nodded slowly. She didn't feel like a child playing soldier anymore. She felt like someone carrying a torch, small, maybe, but burning bright enough to light others' paths. One evening, after another long day on the base, Emma sat at her desk, writing a letter back to. Her handwriting was messy, but her words were steady. Dear, thank you for the letter. Thank you for believing in me before anyone else did. I don't know if I deserve all this, but I'm trying. Every time I help someone, I remember your words, courage, knowledge, respect. I think those are what make a soldier. Maybe someday, when you're back, we can stand on the range together, and maybe I can teach you something too. She smiled as she wrote the last line, wiping a tear from her cheek. That night, as she slipped into bed, she whispered into the darkness, "Come home safe, please. I'll be ready when you do." And somewhere across the ocean, a soldier carrying her letter in his pocket smiled under the same stars, knowing his little sister had already become more than he could have dreamed. How does a single moment become something bigger than itself? Emma didn't understand at first. To her, the day at the range had been one sharp moment of standing tall when she wanted to shrink. One lesson in breathing, one set of steady hands, one target struck clean. But to Fort, it became a story that refused to fade. Colonel Hayes made sure of it. In the weeks that followed, Emma's name surfaced in leadership briefings, training discussions, even official lectures. The example, soldiers began to call it, a shorthand reminder that respect cannot be assumed and knowledge can come from anywhere. At first, Emma felt embarrassed. She was just a child. She hadn't asked for this. But as new recruits rotated onto the base, she saw the chain. On her next visit, she passed a cluster of young privates barely out of high school. They whispered as she walked by, then one of them stepped forward nervously. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, stumbling over the word ma'am when addressing someone half his size. "Are you the one from the range?" Emma blinked, unsure how to answer. She gave a small nod. The recruit's face lit up. "I just wanted to say I was having a hard time keeping my groups tight. I tried what you said about breathing. In, half out, hold. It worked. My instructor even noticed." Emma felt her cheeks flush. "I'm glad it helped," she said softly. The recruit smiled, saluted her, and hurried off. Emma stood there for a long moment, stunned. She hadn't realized her words had spread beyond the base's walls. Later that day, she overheard Sergeant Santos explaining Emma's lessons to a group of trainees. Santos wasn't embarrassed to give credit. She even quoted Emma directly, repeating her childlike phrasing word for word. "You can't fight your heartbeat, you have to work with it." Hearing her own words echoed by a seasoned instructor made Emma's chest tighten with something unfamiliar. Pride, yes, but also fear. What if they started expecting more of her than she could give? At dinner, she confessed her worry to her father. "Daddy, what if they think I'm something I'm not?" Her father studied her across the table. "And what are you?" She hesitated. "Just Emma." He smiled. "Exactly, just Emma. That's all you need to be. You didn't change the base by pretending to be more than you are. You changed it by being exactly yourself." The words soothed her, though the weight on her shoulders didn't disappear completely. Meanwhile, Blake and Torres were changing too. Under Master Sergeant Williams's stern eye, their arrogance eroded. Their marksmanship improved, yes, but so did their understanding of respect. Where once they had laughed easily at others, now they listened. Where once they had mocked, now they offered help. One afternoon approached Emma again. This time his tone carried no defensiveness. He said, using her name like a fellow soldier, "Williams says my groups are because of what you showed me. I didn't thank you properly before, so thank you, for real." Emma studied him carefully. She remembered the sting of his laughter, but she also remembered his voice. Respect isn't begged for, it's lived. "You're welcome," she said simply. Gave a short nod, as if accepting the reply as enough. But Colonel Hayes wasn't content to let Emma's influence stay informal. At the next leadership seminar, she stood before a room of officers and senior NCOs. "We spend years teaching soldiers that respect is earned, but we forget to teach them that respect must also be given. Recently, a lesson was delivered at this base, not by an officer, not by an NCO, but by an 8-year-old girl in camouflage. Her name is Emma, and she reminded us of something fundamental. Arrogance blinds, but humility sharpens." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Leadership is not about rank. It's not about power. It's about listening, about learning, about recognizing wisdom in unexpected places. If an 8-year-old can demonstrate that, then none of us are too old to forget it. The officers in the room exchanged glances. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded slowly. The colonel's words struck at the pride buried in all of them. Word of the seminar reached Emma's father, who shared it with her over dinner. She listened quietly, her fork resting in her hand. "They're talking about me in classes for leaders," she asked, incredulous. Her father nodded. "Because you taught them something no manual could." Emma's small brow furrowed. "But I didn't mean to teach anyone." "Sometimes," her father said gently, "the most important lessons are the ones we never plan to give." The weight on her shoulders grew heavier, but so did the light in her chest. On her next visit to the base, Emma noticed something else. The soldiers didn't just salute her anymore. Some sought her out before she even reached the range. "Emma, can you watch my stance?" "Emma, I'm jerking the trigger again. Can you remind me what you said?" She answered, shy at first but gradually with more confidence. Each time she thought of his patient voice teaching her diagrams late at night. Each time she felt closer to him. But each time, too, she felt the strange shift. She wasn't just a student anymore. She was becoming someone others looked to. One evening, Sergeant Santos invited her to observe a recruit's training session. Emma stood quietly at the edge, watching as the young soldier fired poorly, his shots scattering. "What do you see?" Santos asked, turning to her. Emma hesitated. All eyes were on her again. The recruit, sweating under the attention, waited. She drew in a breath. His elbow isn't supported. He's trying to use muscles, not bones, and he's rushing his breathing. He needs to let half out, then hold. The recruit adjusted, fired again. The shot landed cleaner. His face lit up, relief spreading like sunlight. Emma exhaled slowly. The lesson had worked again. Santos smiled at her. "See, you're teaching without even realizing it." That night Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought of his promise to teach her when he came home. She wondered what he would say if he saw her now standing on the range, teaching men twice her age. Would he still see his little sister, or would he see something else? The thought scared her, but it also thrilled her. As she drifted to sleep, one truth lingered in her mind. Maybe being just Emma was enough. Maybe it was more than enough. And maybe, without meaning to, she was already becoming something her brother would one day follow, not just lead. How far can one small voice travel before it stops belonging to you? Emma didn't know. She only knew that everywhere she walked on Fort, people seemed to know her. At first, it was the soldiers, the ones who whispered her breathing lessons at the firing line or repeated her brother's phrases as if they were scripture. But then, it spread beyond the base. One afternoon, as she sat with her father at a diner just outside the gates, a waitress leaned down and smiled. "Are you Emma?" Emma's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Yes, ma'am." The woman's smile widened. "My nephew's stationed here. He told me all about you. Said you showed half the base how to breathe right. Said you taught respect better than any manual. I just wanted to say thank you." Emma's cheeks flushed. She muttered a polite "you're welcome," but inside she felt a strange tremor. Her story wasn't just a story anymore. It was moving without her, gathering power she hadn't given it permission to have. By the time she returned to the base, she realized it was bigger still. Colonel Hayes had ordered her example included in a leadership training program that circulated to other bases. Officers across the country now heard the story of the little girl sniper, as the whispers called her, and the lessons of humility and respect she embodied. At first, Emma thought it was funny that generals and commanders were studying her like she was a case file. But as she overheard more soldiers talk, she began to feel something else: fear. What if they expected her to be perfect every time she visited? What if she failed? What if, one day, she missed her shot? Her father noticed the worry in her eyes that evening. He said, setting down his fork, "You're quiet tonight. What's on your mind?" She hesitated, then the words spilled out. "What if I mess up? What if they think I'm something I'm not? I'm just a kid, Daddy. I don't know everything. Her father's eyes softened. No one knows everything, Emma, not even colonels, not even generals. What you gave them wasn't perfection. It was honesty, and honesty doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be real. His words steadied her, but the fear lingered. That week she saw the change in recruits more clearly than ever. A fresh group had arrived at Fort. Young, wide-eyed, nervous. Emma stood on the sidelines with Sergeant Santos as the recruits fired their first rounds. Their shots scattered, predictable chaos. Santos leaned down to Emma. "What do you see?" Emma hesitated. All eyes weren't on her, but they could be. Still, she spoke. "They're all trying too hard. They're holding their breath until their faces turn red. Said you can't fight your body. You have to work with it." Santos nodded, then called out to the recruits. "Listen up. You're killing yourselves holding your breath. Try what Emma here just said. In, half out, hold, then fire." The recruits exchanged skeptical looks, but they tried it. One by one, their shots steadied. Not perfect, but clean enough to see the difference. Murmurs spread. Some of them turned toward Emma, their expressions somewhere between gratitude and awe. Emma felt her throat tighten. She hadn't meant to become part of their training. She hadn't meant to become part of anyone's training. And yet here she was, her brother's words passing through her mouth into soldiers' hands. That night she wrote another letter. "Dear, they keep asking me to teach, even the new recruits. Sometimes I'm scared they'll expect too much. Sometimes I feel like I'm not ready. But then I remember what you told me. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being steady anyway. I try to be steady, for you, for Daddy, for me." She folded the letter carefully, sealing it with hands that trembled only a little. Weeks passed and her story reached even further. Military magazines picked it up. A short article appeared online. "Little girl, big lesson, how an 8-year-old taught soldiers respect." Civilians commented in disbelief. Some laughed. Some praised her. Some debated whether it was even real. Emma didn't read the comments, but her father did. He shielded her from the harshest words, but even the whispers of doubt reached her ears. "They think I made it up," she said one afternoon, her voice small. Her father crouched down, eye level with her. "Truth doesn't need everyone to believe it. Truth just stands, like you did." She nodded, but still, the weight pressed harder. Meanwhile, and his friends continued their transformation. No longer cocky, no longer mocking, they worked with recruits themselves. Even began volunteering with youth on the base, teaching them the same fundamentals Emma had reminded him of. His pride had cracked, and through that crack, something better had grown. One afternoon he approached Emma at the range again. He said, his tone different now, steady, respectful. "I wanted you to know I signed up to help with the youth program. I figured if a kid could teach me, maybe I could help other kids too." Emma blinked at him, then gave a small smile. "That's good." Nodded. "You started something, bigger than you, bigger than me, don't forget that." She stood there after he left, her heart pounding. Bigger than her. That was what scared her most. Because she was still just Emma. She still had nightmares when she missed. She still cried quietly when her father tucked her in and she thought no one could hear. She still clutched her stuffed bear at night, the one had given her before he deployed. And yet, soldiers twice her age looked at her as if she were something more. That night she sat at her desk, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. She whispered to herself, "I'm not a soldier, not yet." But then she remembered her brother's words. Being a soldier isn't about size, age, or gender. It's about courage, knowledge, respect. Maybe she wasn't a soldier by uniform, but by those words, maybe she already was. As the months passed, Emma's story spread further still. Other bases retold it. Leadership courses cited it. And slowly, a legend formed, not of a child with perfect aim, but of a child who stood steady in the face of mockery, who turned silence into respect, who taught grown men that humility is not weakness but strength. And Emma, still small in her brother's uniform, still holding her father's hand as they walked the base, carried the strange, heavy, glowing truth. She hadn't chosen to be a symbol, but sometimes symbols choose you. What happens when the legend of a child finally grows into the life of an adult? Years passed, the base changed, soldiers rotated in and out, old names left, new ones arrived, but the story of the little girl in camouflage never faded. Recruits still whispered about her on their first day, instructors still used her lessons as reminders, and near the range the plaque still gleamed, the family range. Emma grew taller. Her voice deepened with age, her hands steadied with time. The boots that once dangled above the bench now planted firmly on the ground. But the fire inside her, the quiet, steady resilience, never dimmed. Came home. Their reunion was everything she had dreamed. Tears, laughter, a hug that seemed to erase every mile between them. He saw her certificate, the plaque, the way soldiers nodded at her when they passed. He shook his head in disbelief. "Emma," he said softly, "I thought I'd come home to teach you, but it looks like you've been teaching everyone else." She smiled through her tears. "You still have things to teach me, but maybe I have some things to show you too." Together they stood at the range, side by side. For the first time, guided her hands as she fired a real military rifle, heavier, louder, sharper than the .22 she had started with. And for the first time she guided him back, reminding him of his own words when his shot strayed. They laughed, they learned, they stood as equals. And as the years unfolded, Emma never forgot. Never forgot the sting of mockery. Never forgot the pride of standing tall. Never forgot that leadership wasn't loud, it was steady. When she turned 18, she enlisted. Not because of the legend, not because of the plaque, not because of the respect others had given her, but because she wanted to live the values that had carried her through: courage, knowledge, respect. On her first day in uniform, she felt the weight of her brother's cap, the memory of her father's steady hand, the echo of laughter that had once tried to break her. And she stood for it. Training wasn't easy. The instructors didn't treat her like a legend. They treated her like every other recruit, pushed, tested, broken down to be built back stronger. She struggled. She failed. She bled through blisters and fought through exhaustion. And every night, when doubt crept in, she whispered the words had once given her. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being steady anyway. Her fellow recruits noticed her calm under pressure, the way she breathed evenly during qualification, the way she listened before she spoke. They didn't know the story. They didn't need to. They only knew the Emma standing beside them, quiet, resilient, reliable. By graduation, she carried not just her own pride, but the pride of a base that had once laughed at her, then learned from her. Colonel Hayes, now retired, returned to attend the ceremony. She shook Emma's hand firmly. "I told you years ago, leadership finds us whether we ask for it or not, and here you are, ready to carry it fully." Emma nodded, her throat tight with gratitude. Afterward she visited the range. The plaque was still there. Weathered now, edges softened by sun and rain, but still clear, the family range. She placed her hand on the metal, feeling the coolness beneath her palm. She closed her eyes and remembered everything. The laughter, the shame, the first shot that silenced them, the letter from the recruits who listened, the colonel's words, the nights she feared she wasn't enough. And then she whispered, not for anyone else to hear but for herself, "I was enough, even then." The wind carried her words across the field, mingling with the faint crack of rifles in the distance. Years later still, Emma would deploy. She would face challenges never could have prepared her for. She would carry soldiers on her shoulders, guide them through fear, teach them to breathe when panic clawed at their lungs. She would remind them of the basics: courage, knowledge, respect, and watch as it steadied them through storms of fire and uncertainty. And one day, when she returned to fort as an officer, recruits would whisper about her again. Not about the little girl in camouflage, but about the woman she had become. And when they asked her for the secret to her steadiness, she would smile softly and say, "You can't fight your heartbeat, you have to work with it." She never bragged. She never shouted. She never claimed to be more than she was. She lived the lesson her brother had given her, the lesson the bass had learned the hard way, the lesson that had shaped her from the beginning. And when the time came, after decades of service, after medals and missions and memories too heavy to name, she stood once more at the range. Her hair silver now, her posture still straight. She touched the plaque again, now weathered by generations. Her voice cracked, but her words held steady. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And that was how Emma, once a little girl mocked for her camouflage, was remembered. Not as a sniper, not as a soldier, not even as a legend, but as a reminder that respect, courage, and knowledge have nothing to do with size or age. They have everything to do with the heart.